Welcome to part 3 of this video series on restoring a Reeves Unicorn horizontal steam engine. This video covers disassembly of the engine and preparing components for painting. Disassembly started with removing the flywheel. This view of the flywheel shows the crack in the rim, which is the reason I machined a new one in the last video in this series. I loosened the grub screw, holding the flywheel to the crankshaft, and slid the flywheel off it. The flywheel was tight on the crankshaft and it took a little work to remove it. Next, I removed the engine off its foundation block. I'll be making a new foundation block in a future video, so this one will be scrapped. There's a lot of video sequences in the next part of the video that show disassembly of the engine. I'll speed these up and describe them as I go. This clip shows the steam chest cover being removed from the engine. This clip shows me removing the bolts from the valve rod fork end. This was tough to remove, however, I later discovered there was also a pin that the bolt goes through. I'll make a proper pin when I rebuild the engine. Next, I removed the water pump from the side of the sole plate. This involved removing the pump air reservoir from the pump body, disconnecting the pump ram from the eccentric rod and unbolting the body from the side of the sole plate. I think the pump was inoperable in its current state. I'll try to get it working when I rebuild the engine. This clip shows me removing the eccentric strap from the feed pump eccentric. I tried to remove the feed pump eccentric from the crankshaft, however it was quite solid. I decided to remove the crankshaft and press the eccentrics off it. The valve eccentric straps were held together with cross-headed screws. This clip shows me removing the screws. I'll be replacing these with bolts or studs later. This clip shows me winding the valve nut off the valve rod by turning the eccentric rod. This was an alternative way of disassembly, as I hadn't realized there was a pin holding the eccentric rod into the valve rod fork end at this point. I was then able to remove the steam chest and take the valve rod gland off the steam chest. This clip shows me removing the screws that hold the big end bearing together. These were cross-headed screws which will need replacing with hex-headed bolts when I'm rebuilding the engine. It's worth mentioning that the blue bin in the background is where I'm placing parts as they come off the engine. This avoids them getting lost. I then removed the main bearing caps, which allowed me to remove the crankshaft from the main bearings. I then removed the main bearing blocks from the sole plate. I'm not too sure about the hex cap screws here. I may change them out when I rebuild the engine. This clip shows me disassembling the small end which connects the connecting rod to the piston rod. Next, I remove the cylinder cover. Then I remove the steam chest studs. I loosened the lock nut on the cross head and wound the piston rod out of it. I then took the lock nut off the piston rod and withdrew the piston from the cylinder. I removed the screws from the other end of the cylinder. These were a mix of hex cap and cross-headed screws. I'll replace the cross-headed screws when I rebuild the engine. The last disassembly job was to remove the cylinder support from the sole plate. This clip shows me removing the bolts that hold the support onto the plate. I put the painted components in aluminum baking tins and covered them with lacquer thinners. This will remove the paint from the components. I use aluminum tins as they won't get attacked by the solvent. As a last step, I covered the baking tins with foil to reduce evaporation of the lacquer thinner. I'll leave the components in the tins for at least 24 hours before cleaning them off. So, that's the engine disassembled and components in the process of being prepared for paint. Next, I'll be making the baseboard for the engine. I'm sorry for the lines in the videos. I'll be checking the settings on my new camera to get rid of them before the next video. There will be more videos of this project posted soon. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe to support my channel. Thank you.